Hey guys, it's Baileywiki, and this is the September 2023 release. And there are a few themes to this release and some really fun new assets. For the Foundry Basic subscribers, it's all about city building, well, like settlement building of all kinds, really. Using some of the innovations you saw last month with the settlement backgrounds. Add to this a new smart roof that I've deployed across all of the existing buildings. And on top of that, I've created dozens of new prefabs of building facades grouped together to make building really fast and really fun. I dropped a tutorial today on this exact thing, so take a look. For Foundry Advanced tiers, you'll want to see the new scenes and assets that Swift and Violet have developed. These are very creative, very useful in campaigns, and many hours put into the new prefab sets for castle components. It makes it really easy to roll your own. So you really feel like you've got a set of Dwarven Forge 3D models as you smash together towers and gatehouses. And hopefully you've been inspired by Baldur's Gate 3. I know we have, and you can definitely bring some of that feeling into some of your combats. And finally, Dungeondraft tiers get all of the new assets now split out across a portfolio of an incredible 12 new asset packs, giving some much needed organization and options for not only finding the assets that you want, but also what you want to load into your world. 4 of these asset packs have expanded this month with a lot of new rich textures, but also the new ancient assets that are used to create the new ancient church, ancient towers, and ancient gatehouse. These enable a much more kind of chunky, massive kind of architectural feel. You're also getting a lot of storage assets like barrels and crates, since we're going to start making a lot of prefab clutter for you guys. That's it for the flyover. Jump around to the timestamps for whatever you find interesting or applicable, and let's start with where to find it all. Okay, so in terms of what's updated, the Maps Premium module is updated, also Maps Towns module, and then City District 1 has a lot of the new tiles as well. You can always feel free to update everything, and of course, update the nuts and bolts too. Your 3D module, if you're a 3D subscriber, also has a ton of updates this month. You'll find all the new prefab content in the Prefab 00 new content folder as usual. These will all get moved into other folders later. And then the new scenes are going to be in your towns folder and in your premium maps folder.
In addition to the new content, we've also made some technical and organizational changes. If you create a new world using the Baileywiki content, all of it will be organized under these new pre-built folders for you. Everything lives inside of the Baileywiki content parent folder. Then we have the prefabs, scenes, and utility pieces subfolders. Prefabs and scenes contain their corresponding compendiums, and utility pieces contain everything else. Note that this will only affect worlds in which you have not already put the Baileywiki compendiums into other folders. For our non-5e users, we have also overhauled our token attacher GM menu. Here, now you can choose which of these individual compendiums you would like to import. This mainly applies to towns, but we've also gone ahead and added it to all of our modules. When you import the selected compendiums, it will automatically import those. You can also flag them all for updating. And it's only going to import those that you have not already imported into your world. Otherwise, it will prompt you to update. This should help if, for whatever reason, your server is not able to import all of these at once because it runs out of memory. Now you can cherry pick which ones you're going to import at a time to keep the load on your system lighter as you begin the import process.
Okay, so let's walk through it. We'll start with our inventory scenes. This is the new ancient buildings. I'm using a lot of AI-assisted drawing stuff to create objects that you can then build into a new kind of, architecture, if you will. This is supposed to be like ancient and like really large and supposed to feel really imposing. And you can see that just the level of detail and things like that is really, really nice with this. You get the church that's first level, and then it's got a roof that's colorable that sits on top of it. It does have some ambient sounds in it that will change based on whether it's night or day. You also have these ancient towers built with some of the same methods, but you can go up these towers. They're a number of stories tall. You can fall down in this hole here and then make your way to the top. This one has some more embattlements. This one is more of just like a flat top, maybe from like some kind of magical spell casting. They have the same interiors, but the tops are interchangeable. You just drag them onto your scene and you can change them out. They do have working torches at the bottom level as well. And of course, these are all available as prefabs. In the building's ancient, you can find the church, the gatehouse, and these different towers. We also have some other decor elements. These things, what I call ramparts, you can drag it out as a prefab, and you can just change the style. These just go well in lots of different situations to decorate the area. You've got some new planks, and then you've got these like large pillars that you can drag in. The pillars are all come multi-phase tile enabled as well. You've got this tile set that has these different types of walls, that kind of ruined walls. And then you've got these different ancient stairs. You can find all of these in the city decor prefabs. You guys have seen these before, except they were desert style. I have now made all of the desert style buildings also have a city equivalent. You'll find them in the remastered, but now you can have all these different variations of the same one. You'll find them under new and city buildings, and here's all of them. Just drag them out and change them around. I also just updated the hallway tile set and the canal tile set. These can all be resized different ways, just if you want to put waterways and things into your cities. And then I've introduced also just some new tiles. You're not going to find these in a prefab, but you can find them if you click on their file path. You go to City District 1. It's in the city settlement, and these are just called stone floors. I've just found these are really helpful in dressing up different environments, and you guys can see how I've used those in some of my practice scenes. Like I introduced last time with desert, and we now have city settlement backdrops. So similar to what you saw before with a couple more variations, these are just set to be resizable. Nothing on them implies a particular scale, so you can make them much smaller or much larger, and they just overlap each other in ways that let you make kind of like any kind of city environment that you might be going for, right? So you just find them in a configuration that they make sense to you, and you can build different sizes and shapes of city maps. You've got a bunch of stairs as well. They all come in a prefab, so you can drag them all out. Again, all resizable, so that you can have them really kind of match up between these locations, right? So if you didn't have a perfect segue from one to the other, you can make a segue just by deciding how you want these to kind of go, right? We also have ancient fountains. They are, as a prefab, you can make it kind of green or a little bit more aged. And then you've got all these different, what I'm just calling fountains. Actually, these are called centerpieces. And there's just lots of different of these medallion type things, which again can go in dungeons or anywhere else just to decorate the floor, break things up. They're meant to go on a floor, and you'll see how I use these in some of the sample scenes as well. You can find them under city decor. Also, the city backdrop is itself a prefab. You go into city buildings, I believe. It's at the very bottom, but just search for backdrop or background, and you'll find it. It comes with all the other backdrop styles. Okay, so more of this release that you see a lot of are all these new facade inventory scenes. These give you the ability to do a lot more facades than you saw before. Facades are just like non-functioning buildings. They have all the pieces that they need and the functionality that they need without all the walls and other stuff because they're not enterable. This lets you populate a town really, really quickly. Now, these are just singles here, but let me just walk you through what each one of them has in it. First of all, they've got walls, and then they've got the roof itself, and the roof is coded as a facade roof using Tagger. All of them have that same code. In fact, every roof that's colorable has this facade roof code. And they also have a couple other tiles, and that's for these chimneys. This one's chimney smoke, and you may not realize this, but underneath chimney smoke is a chimney tile as well. Those can be deleted. Each one also has an awning, and each awning is tagged as an awning. This lets you manipulate these, and it lets you use these controls that I'm about to show you in a second. They're also coded in a way that you can, they'll occlude light properly. They're like 10 feet off the ground, all of them. And you can see that they've got these lights already in them, and these lights are actually set to come on at what essentially is random times. If you across all the prefabs, I randomize the times for when the lights come on. And so that's what makes a prefab. You can just drag them in and you can move them around and you can rotate them. And what's great about facades is, they can really be at any angle. Since you can't enter them, you don't have to worry about them being on a perfect square. So you can make really organic looking towns by angling these, which I'll show you here in a second. Of course, you have some other roofs that don't look the same, just so you can break it up. But I also included this control here. And in the prefabs, under the new assets, you see this control facade roof smoke color. I can drag it out. You can see it's identical to this one. And when I have that control selected, I can press this all colors. Let me show you, zoom in on this. You've got smoke controls, roof colors, and then awning colors. I'm going to press all colors. And you can see it randomly took from the rainbow and created all of these colors. If I just wanted primary colors, it'll do that. And now I can be assured that I'm just going to land on a primary color, nothing too funky. Although you might want funky. And then browns and grays. This is when you want to build like a really cool sort of natural looking medieval town, right? You can always color things in a specific way. Like you could come in here and do the custom and you can say, look, I want all of my roofs to be this kind of, let's try to pick like a royal blue color. Because you might have that. I've seen plenty of pictures of certain districts and towns that have the same colored roof. And you can also create your own custom color. Now, I did a whole tutorial on how to use this. I'm using Mass Edit's premium module. So if I right click that, it gives me all these options to create different kinds of color permutations. So if I wanted everything green, kind of different shades of green, I could go to RGB and it gives me this nice linear progression through those green endpoints. And when I look at the results, I have all of my green roofs. I'm going to select Control A, all of my roofs. I'm going to delete my filters on those roofs, and that will delete the custom color filters. And you can see they're slowly changing back to green. And you also have a bunch of other roofs. I basically took every other roof in my set, made it colorable, and I made it a facade. So you have a bunch of variety of roofs that you can use. And any building that these roofs used to go on top of, you can, if you find those in the compendiums, you should have this colorable version of the roof as the main one. So I thought, well, it'd be easy too then to double up these prefabs, right? So now I've got multiple buildings kind of already arranged in different, sort of linear and sort of haphazard ways. So you can just drag these in as prefabs and they come in like that, right? And all the way up to where I've got like these 3x sort of building configurations. Again, you can just drop these right in the middle. You can make streets and corners. If you mix and match the 1s, 2s, and 3s, you can make any sort of permutation of roads and things like that. And, using that new city system and those backdrops that I showed you, you can do exactly that. As far as samples for you guys to play with, I've got a few in here. There's the ancient cemetery. This is a huge map, really explorable. Kind of uses all of these, ancient architecture components. It's got that church. You can hear this sort of ominous chanting from the church. Of course, you can turn that off. It's just a sound beacon. But just a fun map for you to play with. There's mausoleums and other things on this map that you can enter and actually, do things with. And you're going to make some new scenes like this ancient tower scene that just uses some of the rich textures from my Dungeondraft releases. So I made this map in this background in Dungeondraft, and then came in here and I just dropped the ancient tower prefab on top. And now I can navigate up, fight my way up. I can see through these little cracks in the walls if there are any. I can fall through that hole, right? I can drop down through that hole. And then you get up to the top floor and you've got this sort of magic circle of candles and a book that I set up here. This is just a tile that I just set here as a plot hook. You can put something else in there, of course. But you can see how this stuff comes together for some really good sort of detail density maps. Then we start our city settlements. This shows you how to use all these different tiles. See, these are just tiles that were connected up in relatively random ways to basically build, a colonnade of, and you've got some ambient sounds, all the lights and everything. You can change the colors of all these roofs to something else. You've got a couple of multi-story towers that are set up, and then they all lead into this tavern with got some nice ambient noise, and it's multi-level as well. You can go upstairs. You can have the basement link you downstairs. The old gate attempts to use the ancient gatehouse and the towers as really kind of a gatehouse that's sitting in the middle of a town that it's not even used anymore. It's part of the old outer wall. It's now inside the town. And this gatehouse would be something where your players could, find something going on inside of the gatehouse, maybe somebody using it as a base for something else. But you've got different types of buildings that can be entered or not. It's a mix of facades and other things. So you can see which buildings, when you turn on levels, you can see which buildings can be entered, and you can see like which ones are actually facades. There's another use of the set, different buildings that you can enter. Here's a tower, a guardhouse, here's a burned down building, and then it all leads up to this castle. So your players can enter the castle, and this is from a release in the past. Again, all prefabs, but there's lots of things to discover inside of this castle, and you can explore it quite a bit. But you can see, like, you just put a couple of these together, and you've got these like really varied terrains pretty easily. Bell Tower Square, again, just more examples to inspire you guys on what you can make with some of these being real buildings, and actually all of these are real buildings that they can enter, but you can replace them with other things, of course. Now, a quest of 5, there's 2 maps. There's one that is entirely separated into tiles, so you can see how I built it. And then there's one, because it's such a massive map, there's one that I just pre-optimized for you. So this is the optimized version that only has a few tiles. Everything else has been baked into the background, anything that I didn't mean to be interacted with. So like if we come down to here, the idea is, this tile, this fountain can be interacted with. Your players might click on it and something might happen. There's a tower here in this corner. There's a tavern down below. And then there's these kind of ruined walls that you could have a potential skirmish down here. I didn't want to decide what they were going to discover. Of course, they also have this church that they can find their way into. The church does have a little stairway leading down over here. And then assuming that they collected the clues or the artifacts that they needed, you can come in here and the GM can click this well that has these like chains attached to it that, look like they long disappeared, and it opens up to something underneath. Maybe that's an egress point to a dungeon. But I did use Media Optimizer to optimize this scene so that it's very, very efficient from a tiles perspective. Then we get into our forest settlements, just like the cities, but using some of the forest settlement backgrounds. These are, all the same pieces that you just saw. You can come in here and discover when you turn on levels what they can enter and what they can't. This is how, and I did in my tutorial, I showed you how I made one of these scenes. But it's a great little scene, tons of detail. I think that'll impress your players a lot. We've got more scenes from the same town. This one's showing how the town is kind of built up on maybe some older ruins. And there's a kind of a worship center, prayer center there. You've got some of these ponds and water features. These are just tiles from the set that were added just to show you how you can like add things to your map. I like this one, especially at night. It's this quiet little street in our same town, but it leads to this bridge that goes over some water, and it leads to what could be some older ruins, right? So you can have a segue into a dungeon map there. None of these are explorable. These are all facades. So I recommend figuring out what you want your players to see or find, unless they're going to just battle through here, and then you can replace any of these with a working building. And finally, Settlement 5, this is one I did the tutorial on, so you can go back and see exactly how I built this entire scene. And finally, we have about 13 new scenes. These are pre-made for you to jump into. They are made with tile, so you can replace these things with something else. If you ever see these little dots on the side, those are control tokens. That's where you can, take that wagon and move it, delete it. If I turn on quick edit mode and I drag this over to where the wagon is, then I can move the wagon also like that. So you could get rid of everything in here and just, I call this against the wall. This idea that your players find themselves, against a rock and a hard place. Got a couple of Arctic maps. If you're playing anything in kind of the frozen wastelands, this is just a really easy one. It's got some lights kind of animating the water a little bit and some weather, but otherwise just effective for some kind of Arctic encounter. Same thing here. This one also features some of the old shipwreck assets with some special token magic effects applied, which makes it look like these are, kind of sunken and they're even vaguely wavy. It's kind of underneath the water there. This one's called Broken Land, and this uses the ancient structure and some other pieces from other releases to really create kind of this nefarious, maybe Nine Hells kind of thing that they're in. But you can see I tinted these pieces. So normally that's a lighter color, but it's tinted now. And I tinted it until it matched the background, and you can see it just really merged really well into this background. Cliffside Port is a great place to throw a ship and have your players be able to see this kind of rocky inlet, but then there's also some things happening around these rocks where you can have other things hiding or be discoverable as they approach. One thing I want to point out. If you ever have token elevation installed and active, and you have this checked off, or checked, and you also are running levels, they'll conflict with each other. I've even seen it freeze some games. So you might want to come in here and make sure you tick this thing off if you're not using it. Here's a desolate landscape. Great scene to have a skirmish in. If I go up here, I have token elevation or elevated vision working. So that's why I can jump up to this higher level and I can see and shoot down into this ravine. It's also set up here on the other side. Here's a simple forest clearing. I put a camp here so you can see what that looks like, but you can just as easily remove it. Cool, right? Green Ridge Path. Your players can look down over this rim, but if they're down here below, if I reset my fog of war, you'd say I couldn't see past it. So you can have them discover things as they get above this ridge line. This isn't using anything special except for actually special wall configurations. Just wanted to show you that you don't have to use elevation modules and things. You can just put it together with kind of just wall configurations. Come on, a large scale map. Really like this one. This is a rustic path. Got a couple of trees added to it, but really just an all-purpose path where you could have something be discovered, add a broken down wagon or something else along this road. Of course, we need a clearing in a snowy forest as well. That's what this is for. You can have bad guys hiding behind this line of sight in the trees. Good for skirmish. Here's a good one if you're running like a rainforest type campaign. We're using elevated vision here so our players can descend into this crevice here. And then if they click on this cave, it says a deep cave descending into darkness. So, you can have them discover that in other ways, or you can just delete it. It's just a tile. But it's just an example of something you can throw down in there that they can find out. So that's it for the scenes. Again, there's a lot that's been remastered. I probably touched hundreds of facades, for example, in this release. So make sure that you do look up for all the remastered content. Make sure that you look for those, all those different buildings that we've remastered if you use them in your campaigns, you may see that they've already got the new roofs, just because I just made a direct replacement of those, of kind of the improved roof. And, if you come in here and you look at these, prefab sets, you can see you can really build cities pretty quickly with all of those. And with that, let's hand it over to Swift for the 3D stuff.
All right, troops, Swift here to discuss this month's 3D release. The big things on the 3D end this month are a lot of castle or fortress pieces and a rethink of how we organise prefabs on the 3D side. We've also got some great maps from Violet, making some very creative use of the tools inside 3D Canvas, as ever. So we'll have a look at those in a moment. But to start with, let's have a quick look at some of the main props that have been added this month. The first up is some castle or fortress wall pieces. They've been set up so that they snap neatly to the grid for general ease of use and are exact sizes. Like, for example, this grate and this wall piece are 4 squares by 3 squares. This longer piece is 8 squares by 3 squares, and so on. And all of these large wall pieces are exactly 6 squares tall, so they also snap to the grid vertically as well. So this means that you can very easily snap things like stairs or extra floors or other buildings to them to extend them out or add things to them with minimal amount of freehand fiddling needed. The intention is also that you can sink these down into the ground. So if you've got uneven terrain or just lower walls, you can push these downwards, and then the top will still be at an exact number of squares so that you'll still be able to snap things to them very easily. Further down, we've got various crenellation pieces. These are intended to work with these wall pieces up here, but of course you can attach them to any wall or anything really, and they'll work just fine. We'll see them in action in a minute. Below that, we've got some curved pieces, and these are for structures you can attach to the walls, so like a gatehouse, for example. Over on the right, we've got more of these structure pieces. These ones at the front should also mesh well with last month's props due to being around about the same scale. And then at the back, we've got these octagonal pieces here. These can be used to build up towers of any sort of height, and I'm currently using these as add-ons for these walls we just mentioned here. There's also a spiral staircase for use inside these towers. Technically speaking, there is enough room in there to use like a token inside the tower, but it's a little bit fiddly. So what I've done with the towers we've got set up as prefabs is set up teleporters, but I'll show those in a minute as well. So speaking of the prefab versions, I mentioned earlier how we'd been rethinking how we organise prefabs on the 3D side. Just before I get into that, for anyone who isn't aware, if you go over to the Compendiums tab in Foundry, and then if you type in, say, 3D into this Compendium search field, you'll get the Baileywiki 3D Prefabs Compendium. And so what we do with a lot of our content is we attach tiles to tokens using Token Attacher, and then we put those tokens into a compendium so that you can just drag them into any scene. For example, if we go into Fortress Wall Pieces here and we drag Fortress T-Junction into the scene. So that there is a token with a set of tiles attached to it that's just ready to go. You just need to drop it in the scene. The way these ones in particular are set up is that the token is actually aligned to the top of the wall, so that when I start moving it around, you'll see that it actually follows the height of the token. This is mostly so that you can have the top of the wall at an exact height, which makes it a lot easier to connect it to other wall segments, towers, floors, stairs, that sort of thing. Like, say I wanted to attach it to this gatehouse over here. All I'd need to do is just line it up. And then that doorway on the side there looks like it's about 30 feet up, so I can just grab this token and move it up 30 feet. And there we go, we've got the wall perfectly lined up with that doorway, and that's attached to the wall and ready to use. Then it's just a matter of opening up the Token Attacher UI, which is this chain icon here. Clicking on this Detach All Elements button here, and then you can just delete this tile, or token rather, and then that is ready to use part of the scene. On a related note, with these octagonal towers over here, something I've done with these is set up teleporters, on the ones with stairs anyway, so that if you have a token selected and then say you click on this staircase here, your token gets teleported to the top. And then likewise, if you click on the stairs down, your token gets teleported down to the bottom. So as I said, technically there is enough room inside this tower for tokens to walk up these stairs, but it would be pretty fiddly, so I figured that a teleporter was the next best thing. Anyway, that was quickly how the prefabs work. So what I was talking about earlier is that we've changed how the compendiums are organized. Previously, they were organized by date, which was mainly just a holdover for how we were arranging our maps previously, but that wasn't particularly helpful when it came to prefabs. So we've reorganized everything to be arranged by category now, with matching prefabs grouped together. For example, this scene here is full of prefabs from the Ancient Fortress Prefabs folder. So we've got the various towers, walls, that sort of thing. This should make the compendium much easier to navigate, much easier to find the kind of things that you're looking for. There's probably prefabs that have slipped through the cracks during the reorganization, but we'd like to turn this compendium into an even more powerful tool than it was before for DMs looking to quickly create maps in 3D. Speaking of, we've cleaned up the city prefabs a fair bit too. These are the same idea, tiles attached to tokens. We've got things like street segments here. You've got things like the city walls with the extensions already attached underneath so that you can place them at any altitude. And then we've also got some city blocks set up as prefabs so that you can just really quickly put those down in to bulk out any sort of city map that you've got going. And then over here we've also got some prefabs of some of the smaller walls, some of the smaller buildings as well as like the buildings with interiors, for example, set up as prefabs and ready to go. Anyway, let's have a quick look at some of the maps from this month. We'll start with what I'm calling the Hollow Fort. This is making use of a lot of the new prefabs to create a small kind of fortress or fortification here. One entrance through this archway, and inside we find what presumably once included some stone structures, but seems they may have decayed or fallen down or been destroyed. So right now it's just being used as a campground of some sort. So perhaps the people making camp here are some nomads passing through, or maybe it's a bandit camp, or maybe it's the party that have discovered this place and are taking advantage of an abandoned fort as shelter from the elements of the wilderness outside. This one's also been lit up fairly significantly. We've got torches dotting the walls, braziers on the towers and stuff like that. So maybe that implies that the group that's occupying this place is bigger than it looks, but obviously the map's designed to be quite flexible, so I think you could use this for any number of scenes, really. So hopefully this map gives you some idea of what sort of things you could do with those prefabs from earlier. You could absolutely make absolutely massive castles with this sort of thing, with multi-leveled stuff as well. So I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what people do with it. But for the moment, let's have a quick look at some of the maps made by Violet this month. This first one I'm calling the Submerged Cliff. So up top here, we've got a cluster of kind of tropical themed islands, looking very nice, making good use of the 3D canvas terrain tools to create them here, as you can see. But then if you look down below the surface of the water, you can see we've got this whole underwater area down here, complete with these slowly ascending bubbles and the shoals of fish swimming around. This would work absolutely great for any sort of underwater encounter, whether the party are trying to fight something down here using the 3D space they've got, or maybe even if they're just trying to reach the bottom, since this is quite a tall map. And then tucked away at the bottom down here, we've got this cave with the dark shadows within, and that leads to this map, the Sea Hag's Lair. This one is making some very clever use of some inside-out geometry. So moving the camera around, you can see that this is an underwater cave littered with some ancient debris, even including fragments of dungeon corridors up here that could contain some interesting or valuable loot. This sort of environment, I think, would make for a pretty interesting challenge for any party. If you're running it as being underwater entirely, for instance, then even just being here would probably require quite a lot of effort and quite a lot of clever thinking. Otherwise, you could run this as an underwater cave that does have air in it, which would make it more possible for lower level parties. But either way, this sort of arrangement is pretty unique. This next one we've called the Waterfall Secret map, and it's a super simple but quite clever map. It kind of looks like a diorama, like you would have this thing sitting on a shelf or something. But anyway, up here, there's another one of these books for the DM. So if you click on that, that'll tell you. The map has a secret water underground level. If your players find it, you can use the button to remove the rock wall on the back. So, of course, it's a waterfall in a fantasy setting, so there has to be something behind it. But, of course, seeing through the map is quite difficult. So we've got this button up here that the GM can see, and if they click it, then it turns the back wall completely invisible for the players. Obviously, since we're the GM here, we can still see it partially. But that uncovers the caves inside. and that would uncover the treasure or the monsters or the passage that's hidden away down here. Very clever use of some of the functions in 3D Canvas, and a very cool little map. I do like maps like this here. Super simple, but super effective. Moving on, the last one we'll take a quick look at is this tropical beach map. So this is another one that's super simple, but I think that just makes it super useful. You've got a large area of water, a slope up here with a bit of a beach, and then a flat pathway or a road running along the coast. So this could be a beach landing situation where a party are coming ashore from wherever they happen to be, maybe fighting that sea hag, for instance. Or it could be a situation where the party are just travelling along the road when they're waylaid by creatures from the sea. There's lots of potential tactical situations that you can get out of a really simple map like this. And we've even got things like some high ground over here in the water on these large rocks with the flat tops here. So you could put some enemies up here throwing arrows or fireballs or the like down at the party from above. I think in a lot of cases, a simpler map is better than a more complicated map, just because of how flexible it is. Like, you could use this for any number of encounters, really. Anyway, that's all for this quick update video. As I mentioned before, we're looking to improve and expand our 3D prefabs to bring them more in line with our 2D prefabs that are absolutely top quality and are a massive resource for any GM making any kind of adventure at this point. We've also heard a lot of positive feedback about the more realistic style assets, like these fort castle pieces here, for example. As ever, we do definitely appreciate any feedback we get, so if you've got any questions, comments, or anything like that, then please feel free to drop a comment down below or message us on our Discord. We definitely appreciate it. For now, though, I'll catch you later.
For the first part of the Dungeondraft release, we have a bunch of new inventory and other things, but the major change is that I've taken the rich textures pack and I've split it out into a bunch of different packs. So we've now got grass and vegetation, forest and swamp, rocky, hill, snowy, ocean water, desert, badlands, settlements, fey and magic. Or actually, this is one coming up, the fey and the magic one. But it's all split out, and then we have everything that used to be together is now in the legacy pack. So if you built maps with legacy pack, you'll still need that. If not, or if you want to open up some of my older maps, you might need that pack. I'll have that posted on the Patreon as well. But now that these are separated, you can find things really easily. And by the way, check out the change log for everything that changed. All the new stuff this month is in the artificial. So there's base textures and there's rich textures. So the base texture pack 1 artificial, that has a bunch of the new ancient architecture pieces, which I'll show you here in a second. You've also got new stuff added to grass and vegetation, forest and swamp, and rocky. And then you have this scene where you can see where I made all of these things. So if you can see how I made the background tiles for the city pieces. Using all the different stuff that I showed you. Here's all it took 4 textures to make this scene, for example. And it's got all the new custom walls and things like that. If you want to redecorate any of those rooms that I've created for you, you can just do them here. And you can cut them out of Dungeondraft and put them into your VTT. I recommend if you want to see how I did these things in Dungeondraft, just come in here and check it out. Here's the church. And you can see just by putting these pieces together, you get really compelling and I think more interesting design options. See, I have some Tom Kartos things in here. But, these are just great as far as like making really highly detailed maps with very little effort. There's the roof to the church, also just kind of kit bashed with multiple pieces, right? You can find a lot of the new stonework once you have them installed in these things where it says BW stone. You've got these like cemetery pieces. You've got some of these center points or centerpieces. You have these new floors, which I love. You can use in a lot of different ways. You got some magic stone components that I just thought could be very useful as either door toppers or just putting in to make more interesting things. These you're going to use pretty heavily. Just pay attention to how your shadows are falling, and you may want to hit the A key to mirror it. You just kind of want your shadows to generally kind of go in the same directions. So keep that in mind when you're designing. But so much flexible things that you can just put together, and you can make, walls out of these, or you can make, other things just out of these components. Here's your rampart pieces. Different kinds of stairs. What I'm calling wells or stone wells, they have a little bit of wood component to them. The idea that something is inside, or something can be discovered, or they're just serving to break up maybe a monotonous background that you've got. You can see how I built all of the tower pieces. And then we get into some of the backgrounds for the forest settlements. Again, you can come in here, look at what terrains I use to build this, and you can use entirely different terrains yourselves. Of course, I did use some objects and other elements to kind of bake in some settlement type of features, but you guys can come in here and do whatever you think tells your story. And that's it for the first part. I'll let Zephyr talk about the next set of Dungeondraft releases.
New in the Baileywiki Assets A pack for Dungeondraft, we have our first storage expansion. To begin, these are chest pieces. You can see that there are a total of 6 different designs in wood. Each comes with a closed lid, the open chest, the open lid, and then the composite of the chest and the lid. And these are all available in both a clean version and a damaged version. And all of those have their own colorable pieces that you can calibrate to whatever color of wood you would like, as you can see here. So you can use these for a variety of different treasure keeping pieces, and these same rules apply to all of the stone variants and the other wood variants. Additionally, there are gold-filled versions of all of the open chests for all of your treasure hoarding needs, and a gold coin pile pattern. We also have a variety of barrels in top-down and sideways. There are complete barrels that have their tops included, and then the open barrels, and 3 different designs of lids and 2 different designs laying on their side. For these, there is a clean version, a damaged version, and also a destroyed version, giving you a variety of options when it comes to decorating your spaces. We also have a crate that is available as a composite crate, an empty crate, and just the lid, both in clean and damaged, and fully colorable options as well. Then there are sacks for storing different goods. They have a static version and colorable, and we can also see some of them are damaged, and there are also 3 versions that are intact with different fillings. There's coal, potatoes, and grains for your storage needs. Finally, to round out the storage, we have shelves. This is a more ornate shelf that has kind of a scalloped top shelf that you can see down onto the shelf below. And you can see that they have different levels of ornamentation and reinforcement. And they are separate, having both the lower shelves and the upper shelves in different pieces. There's a clean, a damaged, and a destroyed version as well. And finally, there are these smaller wall shelves that are much smaller. There are some that are freestanding with supports, some that are meant to mount to the wall with chains or ropes, and others that are more floating shelf style. And again, these all have colorable versions and are in clean, damaged, and destroyed. You can find all of these storage assets under the Baileywiki storage tag and the corresponding Baileywiki kit bash materials tag. So for example, all of the wooden chests are under Baileywiki kit bash mats wood, the stone are under kit bash materials stone, and the sacks are in Baileywiki kit bash materials cloth. That's going to do it for this month's Dungeondraft Assets A pack release. Let us know what you'd like to see next.
So that's it for the September release. I hope you guys enjoy playing with this. Would love to see what you create in Discord. Let us know in the comments what you'd like for us to focus on next, or stop by our Discord and talk to us there. Thanks everybody for your support as always. We love making maps with you. And in the meantime, I hope you have fun making your maps.